Have you ever wondered what happens when you give a group of brilliant engineers unlimited budgets, total freedom, and absolutely no oversight from profit-conscious accountants? The answer is simple. They create magnificent mechanical monsters that defy all business logic. These aren't just expensive or exclusive cars. They're rolling monuments to technical obsession, projects where the pursuit of engineering perfection completely crushed any common sense or practical considerations. Today, you're going to discover the 15 most over-designed cars in automotive history. Vehicles where complexity triumphed over practicality, where every simple problem received an extraordinarily complicated solution, and where engineering departments basically went completely mad with no one to stop them. Get ready, because this journey through automotive excess is glorious, absurd, and utterly fascinating. The original Honda NSX from 1990 to 2005. When Honda decided to create a supercar to compete with Ferrari, they didn't do things halfway. They hired Ayrton Senna, arguably the greatest Formula One driver of all time, as the project's lead consultant, not for marketing but for actual development. Senna tested prototypes for years, providing technical feedback that Honda religiously implemented. The result was a car so obsessively developed that they lost money on every unit sold. Let's start with the chassis. Honda built the NSX entirely from aluminum when virtually no one else in the industry was doing so. Not aluminum panels over a steel frame. All aluminum. Monocoque chassis, suspension, subframe, everything. In 1990, this was aerospace technology applied to a road car. The manufacturing process required entirely new techniques, special welding, specific rivets, and assembly tolerances that made engineers at other brands shake their heads in disbelief. The engine was another masterpiece of over-engineering. A V6 with VTEC, Honda's variable valve timing system, but taken to the extreme. Hand-forged titanium connecting rods. Pistons with machining tolerances worthy of Swiss watches. The crankshaft was dynamically balanced with microscopic precision. Each engine was assembled by a single master technician who signed their work. It wasn't a production line. It was handcrafted manufacturing with industrial standards. And here's the truly insane part. Each finished NSX was individually track-tested, not a 5-minute test on an internal circuit. Each car went to Honda's proving ground where specialized technicians drove it to the limit, verifying that everything worked perfectly. They found the slightest problem, and the car was sent back to the factory for adjustments. The 1994 Renault Espace Formula One. This project sounds like a drunken engineer's joke. Take a family minivan and put a Formula One engine in it. But Renault actually did it, and it worked. It wasn't a static show car. It was a fully functional vehicle with a real 800 horsepower racing V10 engine. The Espace F1 celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Espace minivan, but instead of doing something sensible like a special edition with leather seats, Renault decided to create the most absurd vehicle ever built. They took the exact engine that Williams was using in Formula One that season. Not a tamed version, the actual racing engine with all its brutal specifications. Obviously, they couldn't use a normal minivan chassis for this. They built a completely new carbon fiber structure where there should have been familiar steel and plastics. The bodywork looked like an Espace but was basically a carbon shell over a racing chassis. The result was insane. 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 2.8 seconds. In a vehicle that had the silhouette of a 7-seater minivan. The sound was otherworldly. A naturally aspirated Formula One Phi 10, howling at over 13,000 revolutions per minute inside what looked like the car your mum used to take you to school. The BMW Z1 from 1989 to 1991. In the 1980s, BMW decided that outward opening or side-sliding doors were too conventional and boring. So they created the Z1, a roadster with doors that literally plunged vertically into the body sills, disappearing completely below the body. Watching it in action was like witnessing technological magic. Using it was completely unnecessary. The mechanism required 13 electric motors dedicated exclusively to the door system. 13. To put this in perspective, most cars of that era used a single electric motor for all 4 windows combined. But BMW didn't just want complicated doors. They wanted the entire car to be an experiment in advanced technology. The entire body was constructed from thermoplastic panels that, in theory, you could swap out like clothes. BMW claimed they could be removed and replaced in 40 minutes. In practice, finding someone to do it or obtaining the panels was nearly impossible. The rear suspension was so advanced that BMW refined it and later used it in the 3 Series, their best-selling model. They designed a completely flat floor to optimize aerodynamics. Here's the ultimate irony. The Z1's star attraction was that you could drive it with the doors wide open, feeling the wind blast your legs at 120 kilometers per hour. Practical? Absolutely not. But by doing so, you completely destroyed all the carefully engineered aerodynamics that the flat floor was meant to optimize. The Citroën SM from 1970 to 1975. The SM is what happens when French engineers decide that every conventional automotive component should be reinvented simultaneously. Launched in 1970, it was meant to be Citroën's Gran Turismo masterpiece. Instead, it became a rolling laboratory for solutions to imaginary problems. Citroën didn't have a suitable engine for a high-performance GT, so they simply bought the entire Maserati and commissioned them to design a specific V6. Not just any V6, but one with 3 Weber carburetors and timing chains that needed adjustments every 5,000 kilometers. The engine was mounted so far forward in the engine bay that changing the front spark plugs required removing half the bodywork. The suspension was pure French ingenuity. Citroën used its famous hydraulic system capable of raising and lowering the car, keeping it level under any load, and offering magic carpet-like comfort. It sounds wonderful until you realize it operated at 2,500 psi, more pressure than much heavy industrial machinery. A small leak, and your elegant SM would be sitting pathetically on its rubber bumpers. But the steering was where Citroën really went mad. They created Diravi, a fully hydraulic system with self-centering and speed-dependent variable assistance. The steering wheel only turned 2 full turns lock to lock. At high speeds, a simple sneeze could send you into the next lane. It was so sensitive and strange that driving an SM required relearning everything you knew about steering cars. The SM had rain-sensing windshield wipers in 1970. The Porsche 959 from 1986 to 1993. The 959 was Porsche's attempt to create the most technologically advanced supercar in the world. They succeeded, but lost 150,000 German marks on every unit sold. The 959 had electronically programmable all-wheel drive at a time when most cars didn't even have ABS. The system could distribute power between the front and rear axles depending on conditions, something commonplace today, but which in 1986 was pure magic. The suspension could be adjusted for computer-controlled height. You had options for different surfaces: normal road, wet, snow, or track. The car would automatically lower or raise itself, optimizing aerodynamics or ground clearance depending on what you were doing. The turbos were sequential at a time when nobody really understood how to make sequential turbos work without horrible lag. Porsche solved this with advanced electronics and engine management that was decades ahead of its time. The tires were special, inflated with nitrogen instead of normal air because pressure variations with temperature had to be minimized. Sensors constantly monitored the pressure. If it dropped even slightly, the system would alert you. The chassis combined Kevlar and aluminum with aerospace construction techniques. They weren't building a car, they were building a fighter jet on wheels. Car number 10. The 2003 to 2010 Mercedes SLR McLaren. When Mercedes and McLaren decided to collaborate on a supercar, the result was a car where both companies wanted to control everything, resulting in compromise after compromise that created something gloriously complicated. The engine was a supercharged 5.4-litre V8 mounted entirely in front of the front axle, in an absurdly forward front engine configuration. Mercedes insisted this created perfect balance. McLaren thought it was madness, but caved. The result was so heavy it needed absolutely extreme brakes. Carbon ceramic discs the size of small car wheels. They cost a fortune to replace but were necessary because the SLR weighed 1,750 kilograms, despite using carbon extensively. The doors were electric gull wings with 14 safety checkpoints before opening. If any of those 14 sensors detected anything remotely wrong, the doors wouldn't budge. You were trapped inside until the problem was fixed, which usually required a dealership visit. The interior was covered in visible carbon fiber, including places no one would ever look. Under the seats, behind panels, in hidden compartments. All carbon. Not out of structural necessity, but because both brands wanted to show off their extensive use of the material. The exhaust had chromed side outlets the size of truck exhaust pipes. They made a glorious noise, but they also directed heat and fumes precisely where pedestrians walk in parking lots. The SLR was fast, beautiful, and exceptionally well built. The Volkswagen Phaeton from 2002 to 2016. The Phaeton may be the most ambitious and over-designed failure in modern automotive history. Ferdinand Piëch, CEO of the Volkswagen Group, personally decided that Volkswagen needed a luxury sedan capable of humiliating the Mercedes S-Class and BMW 7 Series. The result was a $100,000 Volkswagen with more technology than a space shuttle. Piëch personally set absurd requirements. The car had to maintain 300 kilometers per hour all day in 50 degrees Celsius outside. The interior could not exceed 22 degrees under the scorching desert sun. It had to be so quiet that you could hold a normal conversation at 300 kilometers per hour. These weren't suggestions, they were orders. To fulfill this madness, Volkswagen went completely insane. The Phaeton had 4-zone climate control with 18 electric motors just to distribute air. The draft-free ventilation used literally aerospace technology. They installed double-glazed acoustic glass so heavy that it required reinforced hinges in the doors. The air suspension had more sensors than the complete electronic system of many entire cars. But the most ridiculous thing was the factory. Piëch built a new plant in Dresden exclusively for the Phaeton. It wasn't an assembly line. It was a crystal palace called the Transparent Factory. Customers could watch their car being assembled by technicians in immaculate white coats, as if it were a Swiss watch. The factory had maple wood floors. Wood floors in an automotive plant. The trunk closed smoothly with electric motors. The Aston Martin Lagonda from 1976 to 1990. The Lagonda was Aston Martin's attempt to create a futuristic luxury sedan. It became a cautionary tale about the dangers of adopting technology too soon. It was the first mass-produced car with a fully digital dashboard. We're not talking about a small digital display. The entire dashboard consisted of CRT screens with computer graphics showing speed, RPM, and other vehicle information. In 1976, this was science fiction come true. The problem was that 1970s electronics were terribly unreliable. Displays constantly failed. Sensors gave erroneous readings. Systems froze, requiring complete resets. Aston Martin dealerships maintained permanent inventories of replacement electronic modules because they knew every Lagonda sold would be returned repeatedly. The exterior design was an angular, futuristic wedge that aged instantly. What looked cutting-edge in 1976 looked dated by 1980. The car cost an absolute fortune, but spent more time in the workshop than on the road. CRT screens failed in direct sunlight. Engine heat affected the electronics. Humidity caused short circuits. Every problem required specialized technicians because no one else understood these systems. Aston Martin lost money and reputation with every Lagonda sold. The McLaren Formula One from 1992 to 1998. Before Formula One, supercars were fast but full of unavoidable compromises. Gordon Murray, its designer, decided that this was completely unacceptable. He was given a virtually unlimited budget and a single instruction: create the best driving car ever made, regardless of cost. The result was pure obsession materialized in carbon and metal. Murray did something no one had attempted. He placed the driver's seat in the exact center of the car with 2 passenger seats flanking it slightly behind. This configuration required designing pedals, a steering wheel, a dashboard, and controls entirely bespoke. It also necessitated butterfly doors because it was physically impossible to get in any other way. But Murray insisted it was the only correct way to experience pure driving. The engine was another odyssey. McLaren wanted the best naturally aspirated engine possible. They went first to Honda. Honda said no. Then they approached BMW Motorsport with seemingly impossible specifications. A naturally aspirated V12 with more than 100 horsepower per litre, but capable of running in city traffic without overheating. BMW delivered a masterpiece, a 6.1-litre engine producing 627 horsepower. It could cruise peacefully at idle or roar to 7,400 revolutions per minute. The engine bay was literally lined with real gold leaf, not for absurd luxury, but because gold is the best-known heat reflector. Each F1 car had approximately 16 grams of gold leaf protecting components from the engine's brutal heat. The obsession with weight was almost obsessive. The toolkit was made entirely of titanium to save grams. The CD player was specially redesigned to weigh 50% less than standard versions. Even the air conditioning was re-engineered to be ultra-light, although it ended up being optional because it added 14 kilograms. The Bugatti Veyron from 2005 to 2015. The Veyron began with a seemingly simple objective: to be the fastest production car in the world, exceeding 400 kilometers per hour. What followed was an engineering project so ambitious that many experts declared it physically impossible. The Volkswagen Group spent €1 billion developing it, losing €5 million on each unit sold. Yes, they lost more money per car than entire supercars from other brands cost. The fundamental challenge was pure physics. Aerodynamic drag increases exponentially with speed. Going from 320 to 400 kilometers per hour doesn't require 25% more power, but almost double. Bugatti created an absolutely insane W16 engine, basically two V8 engines joined in a W configuration, with 4 turbochargers and 1,000 horsepower. The cooling system was more complex than entire cars. 10 radiators distributed throughout the vehicle desperately tried to maintain controllable temperatures. At top speed, the Veyron consumed 5 liters of gasoline per minute. Not per hour, per minute. The entire tank was empty in 12 minutes of full throttle driving. The tires, specially developed by Michelin, cost €25,000 for a complete set and lasted exactly 15 minutes at top speed before disintegrating due to centrifugal forces. The tires failed structurally after 3 top-speed attempts. Changing them required completely removing the wheels and shipping them to France for inspection and reinstallation at a cost of €70,000. The top-speed mode was a ritualized procedure. You had to bring the car to a complete stop, insert a special physical key into a slot under the driver's seat, and wait while the car executed an automated checklist, lowering the suspension, retracting the spoiler, and adjusting the aerodynamics. It was like preparing a fighter jet for a mission. Everything about the Veyron was excessive out of sheer physical necessity. Carbon ceramic brakes capable of bringing it to a halt from 400 kilometers per hour in under 10 seconds. All-wheel drive with variable power distribution. A 7-speed dual-clutch transmission designed to handle brutal torque. The Mercedes S-Class W140 from 1991 to 1998. The W140 is what happens when German engineers are given absolute carte blanche with no budget constraints. Mercedes spent $1 billion in the 1980s developing it. They tested prototypes for a total of 16 million kilometers. The result was a car so over-engineered that it nearly bankrupted the company. The doors had double-glazed, sound-insulating glass, soft close mechanisms that attracted them magnetically. The windows had one-touch up-down with obstacle detection in 1991, when that technology was science fiction. But Mercedes didn't stop there. They added heated windshield washer nozzles, an electric steering column with position memory, fully electric rear headrests. The W140 introduced multi-link front suspension to the S-Class. It had so many electronic control units that mechanics needed special diagnostic equipment just to communicate with the car. The wiring harness weighed over 45 kilograms. 45 kilos of wiring alone. Some models had up to 100 electric motors distributed throughout the vehicle. For brutal perspective, a contemporary Honda Civic had approximately 6 electric motors in total. The W140's seats alone had 12 motors each. The optional rear hydraulic suspension kept the car perfectly level regardless of load. It worked wonderfully until it inevitably failed, costing $5,000 to repair. The climate control maintained different temperatures in 4 zones, while monitoring solar intensity and adjusting airflow automatically. The W140 was so heavy due to all this technology that Mercedes had to develop entirely new engines just to move it properly. The V12 model weighed 2,500 kilos empty, more than many modern SUVs. It needed special tires homologated specifically for its combination of weight and speed. When it was released, Mercedes CEO Helmut Werner himself publicly admitted that they had gone too far. It was too expensive to manufacture, too expensive to buy, too expensive to maintain. The Maybach 57 and 62 were produced from 2002 to 2012. The Maybach was Mercedes's desperate attempt to revive its ultra-luxury brand to compete with Rolls-Royce and Bentley. The result was basically a brutally stretched S-Class sold at twice the price with absurd luxuries that nobody wanted. The paint job consisted of 17 layers, applied and polished entirely by hand. The process took a full month per car, not because it was technically necessary, but because Maybach needed to justify the stratospheric price. The options were ridiculously absurd. Integrated refrigerated champagne cooler, cabin air freshener with interchangeable fragrances, electric curtains on all windows, electrochromic panoramic sunroof that automatically darkened, rear seats that reclined to a near horizontal position with a fold-out footrest. All this in a car that cost between 400,000 and 500,000 euros depending on the configuration. The fundamental problem was that nobody wanted to pay €500,000 for a glorified Mercedes, no matter how many layers of paint it had. Rolls-Royce and Bentley offered the prestige of a century-old brand. Maybach offered a logo no one recognized on a car that clearly shared parts with the S-Class. Billionaires aren't stupid. They recognized the door handles, the switches, the controls. They knew they were paying an extra 300,000 euros for essentially expensive paint and softer leather. Mercedes sold barely a handful of units annually. The brand became a joke among the automotive elite, a symbol of more money than common sense. After a decade of brutal losses, Mercedes completely cancelled the Maybach brand in 2012. It was resurrected years later as a sub-brand of the S-Class, implicitly admitting that the original concept was a costly mistake. The Maybach 57/62 proved that over-design and excessive luxury don't compensate for a lack of brand prestige. You can put all the leather and technology in the world in a car, but if it doesn't have the right logo, the ultra-rich simply aren't interested. The Audi A2 from 1999 to 2005. The A2 may be the most technically advanced car that absolutely no one wanted to buy. In 1999, Audi decided to create the most sophisticated compact hatchback in the world. They crammed every available technology into a small hatchback. The result was a commercial disaster 20 years ahead of its time. The entire body was made of aerospace-grade aluminum, not aluminum panels over a steel frame. It was the first mass-produced car with a full aluminum space frame, not just using the material but also aviation-grade joining techniques. The entire structure weighed only 895 kilograms, lighter than a modern Mini Cooper despite being significantly more spacious inside. Audi didn't stop there. They gave it a completely flat floor, optimizing aerodynamics. The front grille had active shutters that closed automatically at high speeds. The windshield was almost completely flush with the body. It achieved a drag coefficient of 0.25, better than many current sports cars, in the 1999 model. The obsession continued inside. The seats could be completely removed and used as camping chairs. The rear bench seats slid forward or backward. The trunk had integrated rails for accessory systems. They even designed ultra-thin air vents to maximize interior space. Then came the 3-liter version, named for its target fuel consumption, 3 liters per 100 kilometers. They fitted it with extremely narrow tires. Aerodynamic fairings covered the rear wheels. A robotized manual transmission. Ultralight magnesium wheels. Special low-friction synthetic oil. They achieved exactly 3 liters per 100 kilometers in 1999. Nobody cared. It was too expensive for its size, too strange and futuristic for conservative buyers. Customers didn't understand why a small Audi cost the same as a mid-size Mercedes. The Volkswagen Phaeton W12 from 2002 to 2016. Yes, the Phaeton appears twice on this list because the W12 version deserves individual recognition as the most absolutely over-engineered car of all time. The regular Phaeton was already absurdly complicated, but the W12 took the madness to a whole new level. It wasn't simply a bigger engine, it was Ferdinand Piëch's obsessive personal mission to literally outperform every luxury car on the planet simultaneously. The W12 engine was a monument to unnecessary engineering. Basically, 2 narrow-angle VR6 engines joined on a common crankshaft, creating a 6.0-liter engine that was physically more compact than many V8s. It generated 420 horsepower, not particularly impressive numerically, But the way it was achieved certainly was. It had 2 complete cooling circuits, 5 independent radiators, a 13-litre oil sump, 13 litres of oil in a road car. But the engine was just the beginning of the delirium. The Phaeton W12 featured air suspension with continuously variable damping control on all 4 wheels independently. It could scan the road ahead and adjust the suspension before reaching a bump. The system had more processing power than entire personal computers of the 1990s. It leveled the body with such absurd precision that Volkswagen claimed you could technically perform surgery in the back seat. The all-wheel drive could continuously vary from 50% to 100% rear-wheel drive. It used an electronically controlled torsion differential capable of predicting slippage before it physically occurred. The 5-speed automatic transmission had so many electronic controls that it required its own dedicated cooling system. The interior took luxury to the utterly absurd. 18-way adjustable seats with heating, ventilation, and massage, not just one type of massage, but 4 different programs with individually adjustable intensity. The rear seats reclined. The headrests had integrated heating. Even the door panels were heated. The wood came from a single tree to ensure perfect grain continuity. Volkswagen invested 100 hours just selecting wood for a single car. The leather came from bulls specifically raised at high altitudes to avoid insect bites that could damage the hides. The carpeting was so thick that it had to be specially designed to work with an electronic parking brake. The climate control system used 18 electric motors, maintaining 4 zones with 1 degree Celsius precision. It detected open windows and automatically adjusted airflow to avoid turbulence. It monitored humidity and defrosted the windows before they fogged up. It was so absurdly complex that Volkswagen had to create entirely special diagnostic tools. Routine servicing required technicians with intensive, specialized training. Some repairs literally required experts to be flown in from Germany. One owner reported a bill of $15,000 for repairing the air suspension. Another paid $8,000 for an electronic module controlling the trunk. And there you have it, the 15 most gloriously over-engineered cars in automotive history. Each one is a testament to what happens when brilliant engineers are given too much freedom and no one is supervising them with a calculator.